Hi, my name is Ruthanne and I'm an alcoholic. I'm really glad to be here tonight. I actually just found out about this meeting. One of the participants here tonight had mentioned it. We were in another meeting and I thought, well, let's see what this is about. So I guess it's going to be about me. I'm really glad to be here tonight with all of you. So as I said, my name is Ruthanne. I am a recovering alcoholic. I say recovering because I'm actively participating in it, and I am no longer obsessed with the thought and the compulsion to drink. But boy, when I came into this room, I couldn't think of anything other than that. I think I had a pretty typical upbringing, great parents, Midwestern, suburban. I'm from the Chicagoland area. We were in a little farm town far to the southwest of the city. Grew up there, lots of people, and everybody's kind of watching over each other. But again, very typical. But being in a little, farm town, the only thing we could do as teenagers was Boone's Farm, and so we would. But and I don't know. I wonder sometimes if that's what planted a seed. That it's immaterial, because the more I started growing up and having kids and babies and getting married, well, not in the order that traditionally getting married, then having kids and having babies and then kids and growing up, I was too busy to drink. So I didn't really have, much, I didn't have much experience drinking. But then kind of a perfect storm started to brew. I was talking about, I had gotten a new job. I kind of, stayed in the same career, but just kind of evolved into a different kind of a new company and a different kind of a role. And our last parent had died. Out of our four parents that were alive when we got married, the last one had died. My marriage was crumbling. I've been married 30 years. My marriage was falling apart. And I had this new job, and then, with the marriage falling apart, I had a son getting married, another one off to college. And so, my coping technique was to just drink, and, I like the bubbles. And then, we went on wine tours. I went on, to these passport weekends in Napa Valley and Sonoma Valley, and had wine that we'd shuttle by helicopter to the old vines, and we'd sip in them, and we'd start off the weekend with drinking, and then end it all day drinking. So it always seemed fun and sexy and glamorous, and I was all sophisticated, and I'm bougie. I also have a pink collar job. I've got things pretty, I thought I'm pretty special, and and all that sophisticated professionalism. But you know what? Alcohol does not discriminate. So while all this thing was happening, I ended up having to move, and my coping technique was to go home and have a glass of wine. And then it's like, well, another glass, as we all know that story. And then that wasn't doing it. So then it's becoming, I'll have a little martini. And I had a little shaker and everything, and make dirty martinis. And then I got to the point where I was drinking vodka out of the bottle. Morning, noon, and night, even, as a matter of fact. And I figured, well, if it's 10 o'clock and I have my last one and I pass out, if I wake up at 2 o'clock, which wasn't really a sleep, it was more like a pass out, wake up at 2 o'clock, have another swig of it. So what? It's still night. And then it got to the point where I didn't even feel good in the morning, and I know I was addicted, but I didn't want to admit it. And I knew something was wrong, and I kept saying, okay, I'll quit tomorrow. Didn't want to admit it. And then the morrow would come, the tomorrow would come, still just couldn't do it. So finally, after, it was probably about a 5-year stint of my drinking and actively and ramping up. So relatively short career comparatively to some others. But I know that once you start putting alcohol in your system, it's wicked. That part about it being compelling and insidious and cunning and baffling and powerful, all of those things. So it was playing with my mind. It was, and then that my mind was my body was putting off gases. It was clouding my ability to function, think, and my judgment and analyze, and even to read a book was impossible. So I don't know how I kept my job. I did, and then I didn't. So between that and the love of my friends, they were talking about going into a program, and I'm like, yes, I know I need to. And I weighed all of the things. I called inpatient centers that I need to detox. I called intensive outpatient programs, and I'm asking them all kinds of bougie questions, like, well, what's your success rate? And what's your average clientele? Because I'm above everything. All I could think about was myself. So, but all of them, fed over to AA. I'm like, I'm going to skip that middleman because I'm so smart and crafty. I'm just going to skip that middleman of this program, and I came into AA. And it was July of 2015. And I struggled for a while. I had probably my first year of up, in, going, and then I'd fall off because I thought, well, I've done it now for, 30 days. Then I would try again. And then I thought, okay, came right back. I was like that boomerang, that bad penny that just keeps coming back in. And I try, 90 days. And I'm like, well, it's been long enough. I've kind of proven myself. And so the one thing I learned from all of that is that it doesn't matter. I will not, as soon as I start drinking, I know what is going to happen. I won't be able to contain myself. I won't be able to stop it. So, kept coming back. And so with that first year, I then hit on a date, and I didn't pick it, and just came by after like a pretty heavy binge. And 4/16 of 17. So things started to change after that. Things got really good. And then I met someone, and we ended up, I ended up moving in with him, and things were good. And his daughter had triplet boys, and we took care of them together since I wasn't working. I took care of, I helped him take care of those triplets for the first 2 years of their lives. You always need two people when there are triplet boys in the house, newborns. So that was all going well. And then I got a job offer, and I'm like, yep, I'm ready to go back. Talked about it. I knew I was ready to go back into the working world, and I did. And things were very good. That went on for like another 2 years. And we even decided to get married in February of 19. Got married, and I was still working full time. And then 4 months after that, he died. And boy, that was a lot of grief and a rearrangement. I didn't want that new normal, but I knew that he totally supported and helped me through some of my painful times. And so, that was going, I took a little bit of a family medical leave time. I was off for a month to bury him and try to decide what I was going to do, but there's no way I could decide. I wasn't in emotionally things, but it's a good thing I wasn't drinking, because I know I would not have been able to make decisions like back then, like I can now. Well, things did get good. I mean, first it got worse. I had a 2-year binge. So as soon as I went back to work, 4 months after he died, I lost my job there due to restructuring. 4 months later, I got a new job, but COVID was hitting. So then kind of had to learn a new company, learn a new software system, learn a new platform for delivering. I'm a trainer in the insurance industry, so we had to learn a new way of delivering this information, all in a time of upheaval and while I was going through some pretty heavy duty grief. And then my brother decided to get sick too, so let's just pile it on. I didn't drink. 4 months after that, I did have to move out of that house because part of our agreement was I had my own place. He had his own place. His place belonged to his kids. My place belongs to me. So I did come back to my place, and simultaneously I moved my sick brother into a supported living environment. And 4 months later, after that, all 3 of our dogs died. I had 1, he had 2, and so I lost all 3 of them. And I didn't drink. And 4 months after that, my brother died, and I didn't drink. So that was last February. It's been another, and afterwards I had like a ceremony. I went to 4 meetings. I said prayers. I told, in my prayers, I told my God, I said, I have done this. I have proven myself. I can do this. And I know I couldn't have done it if I didn't have the companionship of the Zoom meetings. It was so important to me, having a community of people that I could connect with, keep talking to. And then many of my fellows in the club that I call my home group are very dear best friends. We go out and do activities. So my life totally changed coming into the program. I went through 2 years of a pretty, things were going well. And I went through another 2 years where things were a little bit shaky. And then I went through 2 years of where it was hellacious. And now I'm doing my swan song, I'll tell you. I am just enjoying this. Since things have gotten better, I met someone who was also a widow, a friend of a neighbor, or a brother of a neighbor. And we started hanging out and enjoying, he was lonely, I was lonely, but I wasn't like desperately lonely. I'm glad I had my time, to be able to kind of absorb and know that I could be okay on my own. So now he's an asset to my life, and I believe that I'm a complement to his. But most importantly, he knows my sobriety comes first. I'll say, I'm getting on a Zoom, have fun, he's like, no worries. And he just totally supports that. I do go to meetings pretty much every day of the week. I either am listening in at a 7 a.m. meeting or I'm on the 6 p.m. meeting. I help coordinate the chairs, and I do host one of the 6 p.m. evening meetings. So we got bookends, AM and PM. So I can always stay connected, and I just keep this front and center in my life, along with my God, along with my family, and then my ways of sustaining myself financially. It hasn't been easy being I can't even say I'm a single parent. I'm just a single, but because I do have 2 grown sons, they have wives and kids and jobs, but I get to be a grandma, and being able to do that. Every time when I was drinking, they would say, well, Mom, you're not going to be able to see the kids. And I'm like, okay, it was all right, because drinking was so important. Now, it would take Mama Bear. I would roll down mountains to be with my grandkids. Back then, I couldn't shoot myself with a shotgun out of a paper bag. I was just such a mess. I know I was sick. I have a lot more compassion for myself now. I don't judge others. And I get a chance to be, to witness a bit to others. And now I found even that my friends and my those that I've entrusted with with this, I don't call it a secret, but I just don't broadcast it because of my career. I want to protect my professional career as I'm winding down. But I know I can't deny this. I can even say I'm glad I'm an alcoholic. I've learned through this program a new way of living. I've learned how to be my best self. I do believe that I am now who and what I was intended to be. So kind of the fast version of just wanted to share that. I'm so glad to be here. So glad I was able to have this opportunity and to be here with all of you. That's all I know so far, as Pink would say it. At one point I was saying, this is like the Hotel California. You can check in, but you can never check out. Now I'm like saying, hey, this is, taking it a day at a time. I keep going until. I just kept going until. So I'm really glad to be here, and good to see all of you. Thank you very much for letting me speak. That's all I know so far.
Thank you, Ruthanne. We still have some time. Harvey, you want to jump in and share a little bit? You still there, Harvey?
Yes,
He's there, but
I'd be glad to, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You want to share?
Let me put some lights on. I'm just laying in bed with this cold, but I'm glad to share.
Okay.
Hey, everybody. My name's Harvey. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here today. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Let me know. Can you hear me, Stephen?
Gotcha.
Okay, good. And that first share was really spot on. And sometimes when we're done, right? And what a great share, and there's so many great lessons in there. My experience isn't one of a person that came in and went out. I'm one of those blessed people. My last drink and my last drug was the Friday before I went into rehab, and from that day till this, I have not drank or got high, and it's been 34 years and change, and it's just unbelievable to me to be living on borrowed time than another time. To qualify, I'm just gonna fast forward to a year before I reached out for help. It was the occasion of my daughter's first birthday, or the night before, and I made plans. I was going to drive her to the aquarium the next day, instead of the usual where she's in a playpen and I'm sleeping off the night before, and I was going to do this special thing, and I meant it. And for like a month, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and I think about it all the time, and I guess kept reaffirming that vow, that one day. Now, realistically, I wasn't planning on not drinking and not drugging when I drove her to the aquarium. But the fact that I was going to take her anywhere instead of sleeping it off was somewhat of a surprise. It was not the way I normally did things at that time. And the night before, I said, I'm really going to do this. And then I'm thinking I should have a drink. And then I'm thinking, no, it's a bad idea. And I remember pouring a drink, saying, I'm not going to drink this, and holding that drink and saying, I'm not going to drink this. And I meant I'm not going to drink it. And then it was like I'm a fly on the wall in the room watching myself drink it down anyhow. And then there was another one. And then, the party favors came out, and you know how the story ends. When I came to on her birthday, her first birthday, it was 6:30 in the evening. Sun was down. She was in a wet diaper in that playpen in front of a television watching static because I didn't pay the cable bill. And the day before, I didn't know anything about powerlessness. I thought I had control whether I picked up, and I thought I had some control when I started, if I was going to stop or slow down. Or I didn't realize I had no brakes and no off switch, and I had no control. But I really felt beaten that day. I was beaten down bad, and I knew that it wasn't up to me whether I was going to drink or not. I knew it wasn't up to me once I started drinking whether I was going to stop or not. And I didn't know there was a solution. And so I just set out to drink and drug myself to death because I was too chicken to kill myself any other way. And the plan was to just put as much poison in me as I could until I expired. And I had almost reached that point about a year later. And I almost reached that point, and I was in horrible physical shape. And I won't give you the whole list, but I mean, I was 1 foot in the grave. I was in really rough shape. And one day I looked in the mirror in the morning, and I knew that I was dead very shortly. And I kind of knew that the day before too, and that was the plan. So instead of that feeling relieved that I'm actually getting there now, all of a sudden I had this desire that I didn't want to die, which You know, I look back at it, could that have been self-interest? Well, it could have been. I don't know where it came from. It may have come from self-interest. But then I had this other thought that popped into my head that I knew didn't come from me. And the thought was that there's a solution and you ought to go find it. And so that was the first of the excuse me, spiritual, you know, awakening, moment of clarity, spiritual experience, however you want to call it. That was the first one that really led me to look for help. And through a counseling center, I got shown to AA, and that was a long time ago. Boy, that was a long time ago. You know, sorry, it's been a great run. You know, I had been disowned by my parents, and rightfully so, and had been disowned for some time. And now I live a mile and a half from them. I spend an inordinate amount of time with my folks here in Florida, where I retired. I got back to school. I got a law degree. I opened a practice, and I've retired all since I got sober. But you know, the biggest, you know, the biggest thing about my sobriety is that I've watched these people that came before me, and I watched their dedication sorry, to helping others. And they just was such, they were such tremendous examples to follow. And I know Stephen knows quite a few of them, you know, and the people that I knew where I got sober in Buffalo, New York, there's really great sobriety. And I was blessed to fall in with the right crowds. And I'm sorry. My sponsor still does a tremendous amount of service. My fourth sponsor, my current sponsor is my sixth. He's been my sponsor since like early '93. My fourth sponsor is, I got about 50 years now, and he does more service than he's ever done. And I watch these guys, and I know they're my heroes, and I want to do what they do. They told me that my thoughts, my feelings, and my beliefs were impediments to getting sober, that smart guys get buried all the time. If I just did what they did, if I followed their example, I did what the first 100 did in that book, a life beyond my wildest dreams would come true. And I can tell you that, you know, as corny as that sounded and as hokey as all those slogans were, every single one of those slogans means something in my heart. And what what those guys told me has come true. You know, they're not really prophetic. They simply are sharing their experience with me, that they did what somebody else told them to do, which is what the first 100 did in the big book. And consequently, their lives changed immeasurably. Stephen, I think you better find somebody else, because I'm dying over here with this cough. And I'm sure it's not much fun to listen to me, but I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hearing who's next up. Or why don't you share with us, Stephen? I haven't heard you share in a long time, and maybe I just missed you. But I know, you know, I used to see at ILAA, and you know, you've been around the block. But I'd love to hear you share with the last 25 minutes, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
Well, Harvey, I'm going to speak for Phil on New Year's Eve, the 31st. That's my 40th AA birthday.
That'll be
So
good,
I'm going to
homie.
speak on Saturday night, December 31st on New Year's Eve. It's kind of an honor to me to be speaking on my 40th AA birthday. So I'd like to get one more person, if one more person would volunteer to share. The recording still going on. If somebody would just jump in, you know, Ruthanne did a great job, and Harvey always does a good job, and you know, so if there's anybody else, just take the floor. So nobody can really let me know, because everybody's muted right now. So
You want me to jump in, Stephen?
yeah, David, go ahead and jump in.
My name's David. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and thank you, Ruthanne and Harvey, for speaking. I say I'm a recovered alcoholic because if you stop drinking, like I stopped drinking, you realize today that you've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and that's exactly where I come from. I haven't had a drink in a very long time, and I've got an anniversary coming up in just about 5 or 6 weeks. And so this is always a difficult time. And as Stephen and some of my friends know, I've been through a lot of things just recently. And in the last 6 weeks, I'll tell you a little bit about my story, but in the last 6 weeks, I've been through the marriage of my stepdaughter, where her father gave her away. 2 weeks later, we buried her father from alcoholism. We had COVID in between. I have a flood in my house, in my condo, I mean. So we've got these blowers. They just tore up all my floors right through the condo today. But these are all high-class problems. And guess what? They're happening around me. They're not happening to me. I get to participate because I'm sober in all of these events and be there for the people that need me and be available. I grew up in England. My mother was a Holocaust victim. She escaped across Europe at 12 years old. Wait, didn't escape. She traveled across Europe at 12 years old. Her parents and family were stopped at the border, and they all died in Auschwitz. And so my mother was an orphan, and my father was the youngest of 10 kids, which was the makings of a dysfunctional family. They sent me to a Catholic elementary school, yay for the Catholics. They then sent me to a Church of England high school, yay for the Anglicans, and I'm Jewish, so that should tell you how dysfunctional they really are. But you know what? It gave me an understanding of God from many different angles, and this is really important because I always knew there was a God. I always knew that there was something about that relationship with God that I didn't get, but I always knew the only reason I was able to survive was because of God. I believed that I was a miracle child. I believed that I shouldn't have existed. I believed my mother shouldn't have made it. I believed that I should have been somebody else, or at least half of somebody else. So I went through high school, and the short version was that I drank in high school. 14 years old, you could go into a pub in England, and people could buy you something called shandy, which was a mixture of beer and Sprite, or the equivalent of Sprite. At 16, I could buy my own beer. I'm still in high school, legally. At 17, I had a driver's license, and at 18, I could buy hard liquor, and I was on my way to college. So I was a full-blown alcoholic before I even started school, and I drank my way through school. What was really interesting about that is I don't remember a lot about school, but I did get recruited because of my mother's background, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I got recruited into a political organization because, young people with ideals, and all of that history and background, and being brought up with all that fear. Don't trust this one, don't trust that one, don't trust the Germans, don't trust the Arabs, don't trust, or a lot of fear. Don't trust your neighbors, don't let anybody know what's going on outside the house. All of that fear that comes with that kind of upbringing back in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and or 50s and 60s. So, when I left college, I went to work for 3 companies. The first company I went to work for was a supermarket chain. Turned up with my briefcase and my college degree, and they said, "Oh, you might want to change that out of that suit." And I said, "Why would I do that?" And they said, "Because you're going to be cleaning floors and filling shelves. This is a management course. You start at the bottom, not at the top." And I had no idea. I was an entitled brat and an alcoholic, and I thought I knew it all. I then went on to my next job, which was working for an insurance company because I needed to learn how to sell. And then I went to another company because I needed to further my career. And the reason I had those 3 jobs, because if you're an alcoholic like me, you leave your job just before you're about to get fired, because you know when you're going to get fired for drinking, and I was always ready to move on at the appropriate time. And I needed those references. Started my own company when I was 24, sold that company when I was 28, and I had enough money never to have to work again my whole life. And I had some wonderful teachers. The problem was I was an alcoholic and I couldn't keep the money. I just didn't know that. I just thought life was going to be hunky-dory. And at that time, I was already married to somebody. By that time, it was 1970. Let me see. It was in the mid 1970s. I had a home in Fort Lauderdale in Florida. I had 2 homes in England. I had my own island, several cars, houses, kids, dogs, and all of that stuff. And what I can tell you is 1 year sober on Christmas Day of 1980. I was 1 year sober. I'm going to just jump forward. And I had a studio that I was dropped off at in Oakland Park, Florida, with a mattress on the floor and a bicycle. Money was gone, kids were gone, house was gone, the islands were gone, family was gone, everything was gone. And I got on my knees and I said, God, you got to be effing joking. I'm a year sober. I didn't sign up for this crap. How could you do this to me? And the message came back, you know, there's a lesson in it for you. This is a time for spiritual growth. And that was my first real humble act in sobriety. And that lack of humility and that turning point in my life, because, you know, that's my step 3, even though I'd worked my steps, that was my real step 3. That's when I stood at the turning point. And when we stand at the turning point, we make a decision to turn our will and our life over the care of God as I understood Him. So that was my second step 3, but that was the one that worked for me. Just to jump back a little, in 1976, 1975, because of my political stuff that I did and was trained. I was a civilian contractor with the military. I got blown up. I was supposed to be in a restaurant, and the restaurant got blown up. I then met my team 3-4 months later in another public place that did get blown up. I was blown clear across the room. By the time they were dead in the 2 bombings, there was 5 dead and 104 people injured. That was one of the things that accelerated my drinking. So now I come into Alcoholics Anonymous. It's 1979. I go to my doctor on Christmas Eve. I'd had several car accidents and all the other stuff that we do. I don't want to get into the war stories. But in 1979, Christmas Eve, I go to my doctor and I said, Ivor, so what are we doing here? And he said, well, I got the results of your blood tests. And I said, what's going on? He said, you got blood in your urine, your organs are breaking down. I said, what does that mean? He says, well, you can be dead in 2 years. I've been your doctor for 20 years. I think you need to go either stop drinking or find another doctor. I had been in and out of AA since December of 1970 when I went to my first meeting. And I could not stay sober. And I had been in and out on several occasions and had no way of staying sober. And part of what was killing me was the money that I had back then, which I'd now lost. Well, in 1979, I still had it. So I said, what do I do? He says, I don't know, but you better get sober. You better go to Alcoholics Anonymous again and try and get sober or get some help or go to treatment or do something because I can't help you. And I came to the United States, called a friend of mine. His name was RJ. He was in the FBI and he was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was my first sponsor. I knew him from some other work that I'd done. And RJ took me through the steps. You know, step 1 is I'm screwed up and I can't fix me. Step 2 is I'm looking at this screen. You're all screwed up. You're all just like me. You can't fix me either. You're trying to get yourself sober. Step 3 was God could and would if he was sought. And 4 through 7 was clean house. Why would God want to live in the crap house I created? 8 and 9 was make restitution. Nobody wants to hear I'm sorry. They want me to repay the debt, meaning and make amends, meaning some of it's monetary, some of it's just, you know, stay sober and get out of my life, or some of it's behave. And so, you know, step 10 is how I practice 4 through 9 every day. 11 It's how I practice 2 and 3 every day. 12, it's how I practice 1. Because when I do something like this, you know, my first admission is I'm an alcoholic and my life's unmanageable. Today, I don't think about drinking, but I can tell you this, my life's unmanageable at times, sometimes minute by minute, sometimes day by day. My favorite prayer of the day, usually, which goes about 4 or 5 times or more a day, is God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know it's me. Because if you guys would just behave, my life would be perfect. But it's not like that, because I have a thinking problem. I don't have a drinking problem, and I don't know how to communicate. Alcoholics Anonymous has been teaching me how to communicate for almost 43 years now. And you know what? I'm going to keep doing that because I need to learn how to communicate. I think I'm cute and funny, and stuff comes out of my mouth, and it's not cute and funny. And then I have to go make amends, you know, because I'm an alcoholic. I have sponsees. I have sponsees who have sponsees. I have a sponsor. And I communicate with these people on a regular basis. I go to meetings. I see Stephen at meetings most days of the week. I go to live meetings, to men's meetings. And I've been very fortunate in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I can tell you this, that I have outlived what I've long outlived where I should have been. And that's by the grace of God. It has absolutely zero to do with anything that I'm capable of doing. My job is to put one foot in front of the other, is to love other people. They told me, what do you need to change? And they said, change everything. I said, how the hell will I do that? They said, you've only got to change one thing. And I said, what's that? How do I do that? And they said, it's very, very simple. Stop trying to manipulate people to care and love you, and start caring and loving them. And you know what? It's amazing how that works. When I get out of self and start thinking of everybody else but me, it is extraordinary how that works. And I'm very grateful for that process, because, you know, I'm not much, but I am all I think about. You know, I mean, the short version of my story is I got lost in a bottle and I found myself in AA. You know, it's that simple. And if it wasn't for the process of AA, I wouldn't have that God of my understanding. And that God of my understanding, I'm going to close with this, Stephen, is called I am. The God of my life is called, in my life. When I stood at the turning point, I made a decision to turn. And when I turned 180 degrees, instead of spinning like the whirling dervish that the book talks about, turn the other way. I went from a God I understand to a God I stand under. I don't care how it works. I don't know how it works. I don't know what it looks like. I believe God is, and it's everywhere. And it works for me. And that God is called I am that I am. He's in the present, because my head is out there in the future, which is full of anxiety, or in the past, which is full of depression. And the only place I can find God is in the present, which is why I find people with long-term sobriety relapse. They relapse because they work 11 and a half steps. They do all the praying, but they don't do the meditating. So you can talk to God all you want, but if you're not listening for the awareness and the presence of God, it's pretty much a wasted exercise. That's my take on God, and the God of that I stand under today. Thank you.